Hello everyone, this is Sarah Newton here. I've been wonderfully talking to myself for about 3 minutes, realising that I had myself on mute, which isn't very good. So I've now taken myself off mute, so hopefully now that we can actually talk to each other. So it's Sarah Newton here. Welcome to Help My Teenagers an Alien. I apologise for that 3-minute delay there. Me and all of my technology obviously didn't quite get that right. So Help My Teenagers an Alien, we are going to spend about 45 minutes here, hopefully, on the phone tonight. First, a few things I want to tell you first of all. If you are looking at the webinar screen, you will want to click the button at the bottom of the pop-up screen in the middle that says Synchronize Slides with Webcast Audio, because there is about an 18-second delay between what I'm saying here and what you're hearing, so you'll want to make sure that the slides correspond with what you're hearing. So that's the first thing. Also, if you've got any questions, then please do press submit a question to me in this little box here, and I will do my best to answer them. And it would be great if we could get some through. That would be absolutely fantastic. I can see you all on the webcast here, and it's just great to be sharing this Monday evening with you. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about me before we get going here. As you know, my name is Sarah Newton. I work in the UK. I have my own youth consultancy business. I've been in this field now for approximately 17 years, 10 of those spent running my own business, and 7 of those spent working as a police officer in London. Excuse me. So as you can imagine, I have seen some sights and worked with probably some of the most disengaged people that you can possibly imagine. And about 5 years ago, I really started to delve into the life of modern-day teenagers and how their brain worked and how technology was changing them, because what I was seeing seemed to be out of sync with what I'm hearing. Help My Teenagers an Alien is going to go through a little bit of that today, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more webcasts later on that go into that in much more detail. If you do want to email me at all, my email address is sarah@sarahnewton.com. That's SARAH at Sarah and then Newton as in NEWTON.com, and I will get your email. So let's get going here. So what do we want to cover today? Okay, so these are the things that I'm hoping that we are going to get through today. So objective 1 is for me to walk through with you how to manage the transition to the teen years and change your parenting style to deal with the situation. Now, it doesn't matter if your child is already in the teen years, transitioning to the teen years. It's not going to matter, because you're still going to get the great information. We're going to look at how to break down the barriers with your teenager so you can reach a new level of understanding with them. I'm also going to give you some tactics and techniques that will get you what you want without starting World War III, and we know what that's like with some teenagers. And also, hopefully I'm going to give you a new understanding of your teen alien and how to turn them back into a human being. So hopefully that's good. That sounds like what you want and is what you're here for. So I look forward to enjoying this journey with you. So, oh, look at the cute babies. And can't we all remember that time when we gave birth to our child, and our child, you know, was so cute. They cooed, they laughed at us, we saw absolutely everything that they did was amazing. It was all that we could do to not cry when we looked at them. They just, you know, it was just lovely, all of them baby cuddles. I'm sure that you can remember them, because I certainly can too. And then we were the proudest parent, the first steps they took, their first day at school, their first sports day, all of these births, we feel like we really, really shared them with them. And it was just great. We loved being a parent. But wait, what happened? One day we put our darling little child to bed, and it turned into an alien overnight. The charming conversations that we used to have had turned into a succession of grunts. Slamming of the doors had become a normality. and the overuse of the word whatever was really, really grinding. What I'm going to do today is demystify, hopefully, this change a little bit for you so you can start to ease into it a little bit easier. Okay. So, first of all, let me go through with you what does happen, and this might make a little bit more sense when we see to the transition to the teen years. So I think there are 3 parenting roles that we really take on in our lives. There's when our child's 0 to 6, and that's the teacher role. This is where we're teaching them to do everything. We're teaching them to walk, we're teaching them to talk, we're teaching them manners, we're teaching them everything. It's just great. We love it. We love being a teacher. Then when they turn 7 and they start, doing more with their friends, basically, and their school activities get more. So between the ages of 7 and 12, kind of take the ed manager or the administrative role. So we're the one ferrying them around, making sure they've got all the books they need for school, just managing their lives. Have you brushed your teeth? Have you got your book? Have you done this? Have you done that? And so we step into this manager role. And quite often, as parents, we stay in that manager role forever. But when that child hits about 13, something happens in their brains, which means that our role needs to change. Now, I'm saying 13. With girls, this can happen a little bit earlier, and with boys, it can happen much later. But it generally is about 13, the brain starts to change. Now, before the age of 13, our children think in concrete thought. So basically, they can just think in what they see and what's around them, which is quite often why if you ask a child what they want to do when they grow up, they will say a teacher or a job that their parents do, because that's what they know. So they can't think beyond that kind of immediate circle. What happens at this age of 13 is the brain changes dramatically, and we will go into this a little bit later. But at 13 years, they start to get something called abstract thought process. Now, and this is really the difference between having an adult and a child conversation with somebody. Abstract thought process allows them to start questioning things, to start seeing the world beyond where they live, and to start being able to hold 2 opposing views at once and seeing them both as correct. So it's the difference between sort of having a conversation with a child and saying, what should we do with old burglars, and them saying we should lock them all up, and us asking a child with abstract thought and them saying, well, it depends on the crime, it depends on the severity, did they have a knife with them, did they have a weapon with them. So it's that kind of ability to reason. And that ability to reason, question everything, including you, themselves, their friends, their school, everything, because suddenly the world looks very different. And you can probably remember this from your own childhood, when you locked yourselves in your bedroom with the song that meant the most to you. And it's very, very scary when suddenly you realise that you're a bit vulnerable and that the world is more than just outside this little world that you have around you. And when they move into the abstract thought process, as a parent, we need to move into the coaching role. Because if we stay there and continue to sort of manage them, have you brushed your teeth, have you got this, have you got that, they're going to get very, very irritated. And the manager has been fired, and this can be upsetting for most parents. Excuse me, I've got really bad cough here. That can be really upsetting for most parents, but what you've got to realise is that, this is part of them growing up, it's part of them really, getting used to their new life and becoming an adult. So, you need to shift too into this coaching role. And we'll talk about that coaching role a little bit later, but let me just explain other stuff that's going on in their brain, which really might help you realise why your child does turn into an alien. So, we've talked a lot about abstract and concrete thought processes there, but let's just talk about a few of the other changes that are happening. Now, if you can imagine the brain is like a tree with all these different branches on it, and up till about 13, your child's been growing those branches and, happily sort of going around their life. And then what happens is the brain starts to prune these branches. It starts to cut them all back and decide which ones it's going to grow. Which is hence why it often feels like our child has reverted back to toddlerdom, and they are having toddler tantrums, because the brain is suddenly things that made sense to them before aren't making sense anymore. And there's three areas it really, really has an impact on. Firstly, on the cerebral cortex. This is the logical and spatial reasoning part of the brain. This is the part where we think out consequences. And quite often parents will say to me, but surely then, it's obvious. Well, it might be obvious to you with your abstract thought process and fully developed brain, but it's not obvious to them at all. Because, the brain is pruning and the connections that were there before may not be there anymore. The second part that it affects is the temporal cortex. This is to do with language. So this is quite often why we get the grunts, why we get teenagers making up their own language that no one else understands, while they suddenly stop talking. On some instances, start talking more, So there's a real thing going on with language there. And it also affects the frontal lobe, and this is the part of the brain that deals with future planning, resisting impulses, and balancing the social, emotional, intelligent part of ourselves. So this is why they're not very good at thinking perhaps tomorrow, or the next minute, or the next hour even. Resisting impulses, very, very difficult. And also what's happening is that their dopamine levels, which is the kind of the hormone that gives us a kick, those levels are dropping. So what gave them a kick before suddenly needs to be 10 times more exciting or 10 times more risky to give them the same kick, which is hence why suddenly playing cards, the game of cards with you at night, is suddenly something they wouldn't be seen dead doing. Also, they're having problems dealing with the social and intellectual part of themselves and balancing them at a time where we're expecting them to do exams. So they become much more risk-taking and much less thinking about the consequences. And it's almost like, really, they are going at breakneck speed with no brakes. So quite often we're expecting our teenagers to actually be grown up when the opposite applies. They're actually reverting back. Their brain is reverting back to a much earlier way of being, so it can figure out who it wants to become. So this is what's really important, that we understand that this alien invasion, is actually quite normal. Although it might not feel normal. I can imagine, that's what you're saying, this is normal, I don't like this doesn't feel normal. Okay, but it is, believe me. Okay, so this was one of a quote that I once heard, and I think that this really, really does sum up the teen years. It's not the number of conflicts that increase, it's the intensity of them. We think that we argue with our teenagers more. We don't. It's just that because of what's going in their brain, because they're unable to deal with these new emotions, because it's such an emotionally charged time, they're just so intense, these conflicts. And the teenager is no longer willing to just have you go, no, you can't do that, and then go, okay then. And that's not because they're being difficult, that's because they're getting abstract thought, and they're suddenly questioning things that they never ever questioned before. So can you see how this is all making sense? They are a little bit of a different race at this moment in time. So let's go back to that new coaching role that I've asked you to step into. And it's very different than pure parenting when we become a parent coach. And if we look at what a coach does, a coach respects the person and their decisions. That's a difficult one, isn't it? As a parent, to learn to respect the person and their decisions. And that's really all about trust. A coach listens to understand. So a coach doesn't listen to get their point across or listen to show someone that they were wrong. They listen to understand, to really, really understand what's going on. A coach encourages responsibility. A coach won't pick up things when they've gone wrong for you. A coach won't step in a coach will gently have you take responsibility for your actions and guide you to take maybe a more appropriate action. And a coach honours someone's free choice. As coaches, as a coach, I know that everyone that comes to me, I can't make them do anything. All I'm really in control of is how I'm reacting to what they're saying to me, and that people grow and learn when they're ready. And we have to honour that someone has free choice in the world, because, that's how it works. And a coach views everyone as capable, and most parents really underestimate how capable their children are, I feel. In my experience, don't trust them and think they're incapable, and actually they're very, very capable if you give them the chance. And yes, they'll make mistakes, but they have to make mistakes. That's whole part of what we do and what we need to do. So, what are the three... So what can we do as parents? What's most important? And I get asked this a lot, what's the advice that you would give, Sarah, to parents? And I say that these three things are the most important thing when it comes to the teen years. And they look so simple, don't they, on that slide? Consistency, communication, and collaboration. And collaboration is in there because this generation is a generation that really, really need that, and I'm going to be going into that more in some more webinars later, later on, because that's a huge topic. Consistency, communication, and collaboration. So, that's all well and good, I can hear you say. Are you actually going to show me how to do that? Yes, I am. So let's go to stay consistent. Sorry, I just had to take a drink there to stop me coughing. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you here about a tool that I love. I made this one up myself. That's probably why I love it so much. And it's called Choice and State. And I actually made this up with a client, and it is in my book, Help My Teenager Is an Alien. And let me tell you a little bit about this client. Her son was pretty old. He was about 17, 18. And she was doing everything for him. She was just being treated like a slave, really. And she'd hired me to help me make her stronger, really. And the biggest argument that there seemed to be in this house was about the laundry. Now, she would always, did the laundry on, I think it was a Thursday. And she would, whatever she did, she always had to go up to him, she always had to go up to his room and pick the laundry up. He never put it in the basket or anything. And she was getting really irritated with this. And so she made an agreement with him, which we'll come to later, basically saying, you need to get the washing in the basket by Thursday morning. If not, it's not going to be done. And made the agreement, and he broke it, of course, and then came down screaming and shouting at her about the fact that his shirt hadn't been washed. And this is where we came up with the choice and state technique. And she rang me on the phone in absolute tears. He's screaming and shouting at me, what do I do? Should I wash this shirt? No, don't wash the shirt. That's the worst thing you can do. Here's what you're going to do. So firstly, she was going to state the behaviour. So in this case, it was James, can't exactly remember his name. James, you are screaming and shouting at me about something that is not my fault. We made an agreement about the washing being in the basket, and you didn't put it in the basket. So you're going to state the behaviour. So actually, I probably went a little bit too far there. You're going to state the behaviour. James, do you realise you're screaming and shouting at me? That's something that is not my fault. Show understanding, really important. And you've got to kind of mean this when you say it. And you would say something like, I can see that you really want this shirt and it's really important to you. And then you're going to explain the situation. This is where I went too far before you. And you're just going to say why we've got to this situation. Very factual. I don't want you to start saying how you feel like a slave or anything like that. Very factual. So the reason your shirt wasn't washed is because you didn't put it in the wash basket when I asked you to. Very factual and very simple. We made an agreement and you didn't stick to it. And then here's the real key here. We then go to the state what you will do and state what you will not do. and this is where most parents fail. They will get to all three and then just crumble and end up washing the shirt. So in this case, what she was willing to do was show him how to use the washing machine, but what she was not willing to do was wash the shirt. So the whole thing went something like this. James, do you realise you're shouting at me? I can see you really want that shirt and it's really important to you. However, the shirt wasn't washed because you didn't put it in the washing basket when I asked you to. I'm willing to show you how to use the machine, but I'm not going to wash the shirt for you. And there it is. Really, really simple. Very factual process that is going to get you out of most situations and keep you consistent. So you're going to state the behaviour, show that you understand, explain the situation, and state what you will and will not do. And this is the most important thing. So we're always willing to do something. And it could be that you were willing to wash the shirt, maybe that once. But be really careful that you stick to what you've said you're going to stick to here. So let's look at communication. Now, I could talk about communication forever. As quite a lot of you know that are on this webcast, I do have a company called Think Cards, which deals in making products that get families talking. So I am very, very passionate about this. A tool that I really, really love when it comes to communication is something called nonviolent communication, which a lot of you are probably very, very familiar with. And for the life of me at the moment, I can't think who came up with this. I'm just going to quickly search and I can tell you. So just bear with me a minute. That's very unorganised of me. I'll just get that information for you. Okay, well that's... Ah, there you go, Marshall Rosenberg. I knew I could get it for you. I knew it began with an M. Okay, so this non-violent communication. Now, there's 4 real distinct ways to do this. 4 parts to it. Observe feelings, needs and values, and requests. So what I want you to do, first of all, is just think of an incident with your children recently where the communication didn't go so well. So I just want you to sit there for a minute and really think of that situation and bring it up to your mind. Have you got there? Great. Okay. So while I'm going through this process, I want you to think about how it relates to the incident that you've got in your head. So I'm going to use 2 different situations here. I'm going to use, the first one is Dominic, let's say, who constantly leaves the front, when his mum comes home from work, the front room is just strewn full of his things. It's driving her mad. So firstly, you're going to say what you observe. So in this instance, it would be, Dominic, when I come home from school, all of your belongings are all over the front room. You're then going to say how it makes you feel. This isn't how what they're doing necessarily is making you feel, but, how that makes you feel. So in this instance, you would say, when I come home from work, I feel exhausted, and when I see all of your stuff over the room, it just makes me feel more exhausted. Then you're going to say what you need or value. So in this instance, you say, I really, really need this room to be clean when I come home. And then you're going to make a request. So you would say, can you please clean the room up? Or can you make sure tomorrow when I come home, the front room doesn't look like this? So let's put that all together. Dominic, when I come home, your stuff is all over the front room. It just makes me feel absolutely exhausted. When I come home, I need for this room to be clean. Can you please clean it up? And I request that when I come home tomorrow, it's clean. And that's it. That's simple. This system doesn't involve punishing somebody because they don't do it. And like I say, you're going to have to be consistent with this. You may have to do this 10, 20 times before they actually listen. But believe me, if you start talking like this in a really respectful way, they will begin to do what you're asking. Now, if the example was more of a relationship example, so say, for example, Dominic was being very rude to his mum and swearing at her, then it's very similar, and it would go like this. So, Dominic, I noticed that you're swearing at your mum, or mother, or mum, if we're listening in the States. When I hear you swear at your mum, it really makes me very sad. I value respect in this home. Can you please not swear at your mum? Can you see how very clear and crystal this is? There is no room for wiggle room here. Your teen will absolutely know what you're asking them to do. So when it comes to communication, that is the system that I suggest you start to use in your house. Because what most parents think is in the teen years, it's about us controlling it, it's about us punishing it, it's about us getting our teenagers to do what we want them to do. It's not. It's about you having a relationship with them. If you can have a relationship with them, you can solve most any problems, let me tell you. If that relationship breaks down, you are in trouble, because then they won't listen to anything. And both of the things we've used here, and the thing, choice and state doesn't damage the relationship. Nonviolent communication doesn't damage the relationship. And we're going to go into agreements now. This doesn't damage the relationship either. So let's talk about agreements. I love agreements. I especially love them because they're a very collaborative way of a home getting done what needs to be done. Now, quite a lot of people will say we shouldn't be collaborating with our children. You only have to look at how their worlds are outside of the home and their online worlds to realise that this generation collaborates. That is what they do. They're great at it. It's how they expect to be treated. Yes, it's not how things were in the olden days, but we're not in the olden days anymore. We are where we are. And if you want to have a good relationship with your teenager and get through the teen years a little easier and turn your alien back into a human being, this is one of the ways to do it. And it looks very, very simple when you're looking at it on here, doesn't it? There's only 3 parts to it. There's what you want, there's making an agreement, and there's natural consequences. Now, I'm going to give you an example here, and this example normally makes most parents inhale with breath, but I think it's a good one because it comes from my own life, really. And I think that that's always great because, you can realise that I'm not perfect either. So, when my daughter, who is now 14, was probably about 10, she came to me and said, Mum, I want to set my own bedtime. I think it's about time I decided when I went to bed. So there was that sharp intake of breath that you take, where you can't breathe and think, oh no, this isn't something I wanted to be dealing with. What do I do now? And actually I didn't know what to do. So I said to her, as I always do, great parenting trick here, give me 24 hours to think about that. Now, I'd headed her off at the pass, so to speak. And I had to sit there and think, okay, what do I really want here? Now, first of all, before I did that, I had to get rid of what I thought anyone would say to me, because I was sat there thinking, I can't set her own bedtime, she's 10. If I tell my mum that, what's she going to say? If I tell my friends that, what are they going to say? What are the parents in the playground going to say? So once I've got over all that and thought, what is it I want? I realised that there were a few things I wanted. First of all, an overriding want for me was that I did not want to be arguing with my daughter about bedtime. I knew that. I remember my own home when I was a child and constantly arguing about curfews and bedtime and, just so weary. I didn't want that. I knew I didn't want that. So what did I want? Did I really want her to go to bed at a certain time? Well, kind of. But what I really wanted was that she got up in the morning without me having to go and wake her up, that she was ready to go to school, that she was bright and breezy, and that she was out of the family room at 9 p.m. That was what I really wanted when I really drilled down to it and got rid of all of what I thought I should do. So then I thought, okay, so she did those 3 things. Would I be happy letting her set her own bedtime? I took a brave move and thought, you know what? I would be happy. If those 3 things were met, I'd be happy. So I went to her and I said, Bronte, because that's her name, obviously, you know what? I'm thinking about this bedtime and I am happy for you to set your own bedtime. Here's the conditions around that. You have to be up every morning when you need to get up. I don't want to have to wake you up. I want you to be bright and breezy. I want you to be ready to learn, and I don't want your schoolwork to drop. Sorry, that was another really important thing. I want you out of the family room at 9 p.m. And, I don't want this to make you moody. I want you to really be responsible around your bedtime. If you can do that, I'm willing to let you take charge of your bedtime. Do we have an agreement? And she said, yeah, we've got an agreement. I will do those things. Now, here's a really important piece that I brought in, which is a natural consequence. Now, it's not always easy for me to tell you what a natural consequence is because it depends in each different situation. But in this situation, it's quite obvious. If she didn't get herself up one morning or schoolwork started to suffer, I would take her bedtime back for a week. And I was willing to take it back 3 times. If I had to do that, then I'd take it back for 6 months. So I told her that really clearly. If you break this agreement, I'm going to take your bedtime back for a week. And each time you break that agreement, that's what I'll do. But I'm only willing to do that 3 times. And after 3 times, I'll be taking it back for 6 months, and then at the end of 6 months, we'll be looking at it again. Because it might be that you're just not quite ready to do this. Very, very clear. And I can tell you, 4, maybe 5 years later, I have not had to revoke this agreement once. Which makes most parents that listen to this chuckle and think I'm not telling the truth because they have so many arguments with their children about bedtime. I've never had one argument about bedtime, and she's responsible for herself. Sometimes she will go to bed at 8:30, sometimes she'll go at 11, sometimes a bit later. She knows when she's tired, she takes herself to bed and she deals with it. And her schoolwork hasn't suffered, she's always got herself up, and everything is fine. So it just goes to show you when you do trust your children and give them some responsibility, they actually can handle it. So, think of how you could use this in your house. And my guess is maybe don't start with a bedtime. Start with something really, really smaller. So that's really easy to think of a natural consequence. Some people ask me if the natural consequence needs to be spoken about at the beginning. It's best if it can be. It makes everything clear, and it doesn't mean that you're, having to deal with another conversation if the agreement's broken. Sometimes you won't know what that natural consequence is, and sometimes something will happen that's, you could never have prepared for, and you need to give yourself time to think about what a natural consequence is. But that natural consequence must be something that makes them learn that, they don't need, they shouldn't be doing this and kind of not do it again, really. Not something that, just punishing them and sending them to their room where they don't learn anything. And think about, how the real world works here. If we break an agreement in the real world, we don't get sent to our bedroom. We have to deal with that consequence. If we're late for our friend's in a bad mood. So it's about thinking of, as an adult, what would be a natural, consequence, and then trying to figure out how you can put that into your home. It's not always easy. If you need to, have a quick chat with me, then I'm willing to do that about what the natural consequence for your agreement is. But I want you to stop thinking about punishments and discipline and all of those words, and I want you to start thinking about learning, teaching your child responsibility. So we've got consistency, communication, collaboration. We have the choice and state technique, we have nonviolent communication, and we have agreements. These will all help you build up better relationships with your teenager, while also making sure you get done what needs to get done. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the common teen invasions, as I call them, and talk about what you can do to kind of alleviate them a little bit. So, the I'm not going to do a thing you say invasion. Oh, we love this one, don't we? You need patience, commitment, and probably a very large gin to deal with this. Really, though, this one is about being really, really clear and with your child about what you will and will not accept from them. So, if they're talking to you, they're swearing at you, you've really got to nip any unacceptable behaviour in the bud as soon as it happens. But there's a few things that you can do here, and I always think that I always believe that in the teenage years it's like there's a fire going on in that teenager's belly, and the best thing to do is throw water on it, not more fuel. And most parents throw more fuel. And we've already seen from what's going on in the brain how confusing a time this is for them. So we need to have, we need to throw water on it. So you can say things like, you know, yeah, I might not have a right. You know, I might not, you know, you might not want to do, you might not want to do everything I say, but I have a right to tell you what I expect. So you can make a choice. Great one, Mark. So I'm not going to do a thing you say. Okay, that's your choice. But I have a right to tell you what I expect, so you can make a choice that's right for you. That one, when you tell your teenager you can make a choice that's right for you, you believe me, you will see an open mouth. Yeah, you could say something like, yeah. You know, I might not. You might not be able doing a thing. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied here. You might not be doing. You know, you might not want to do anything I say, but I've got a right to tell you what is and is not acceptable. And the really good thing is often when we do tell our teenager what we're going to do, something that they need to do, quite often, we're actually telling them when we should maybe be putting it a different way. So quite often, when they say, I'm not going to do a thing you say, oh, I'm really sorry, I said that the wrong way. What I meant to say is you have a choice between X and Z. So can you see how those things would put water onto this fire? So when they say, I'm not going to do a thing you say, go, okay, but I've got the right to tell you what I expect so you can make a choice. Sorry, I didn't mean to tell you what to do. What I meant to say was you've got a choice between this and this. Or you may not be going to do anything I say, but I've got a right to tell you what is and is not acceptable. So let's move on to the whatever invasion. I think what we have to know about this one is really what your teenager is telling you to really trying to do is to get you to shut up and go away. And this is quite often because they're in their own world, they're trying to deal with all them complex feelings and emotions they've got going on, and they just want you to leave them alone. And the best way I found to deal with this is, so if you say to them, are you coming into town? And they go, yeah, whatever. I always say, I assume by that you meant you're not coming. Or I assume by that you meant you'd be ready in 10 minutes. And so when they're saying the whatever, you go, yeah, I assume you meant, okay, by saying that, I assume you meant this. And that will basically stop that one dead in its tracks, because either they did mean that or they didn't, and they're going to let you know. So with this whatever, go, I assume you meant you were unhappy with what I just asked you to do. I assume you meant you'd be ready in 10 minutes. I assume you meant that didn't go well. And this will really, really help to quell that one. The it's not fair invasion. Let me tell you, life isn't fair. Won't cut it with this one. Didn't you just take that when you were a child and you said it's not fair? And someone said, well, life isn't fair. Did you care? No. Did it help you? No. What your teenager is really saying here is you're not giving me what I want. You're not listening to me and I'm getting cross. And quite often they may be right, actually. So the first thing is to, if you're getting it, it's not fair, so, listen, really listen to what they're saying. And what I say to parents is always try and have an attitude of wanting to say yes, which may sound ridiculously silly, but let me show you how that works. So if your child comes home and asks you for something like, can I have my friend stay over? You might say, I'd really, really want to say yes to this. Can we do it tomorrow? Or I really want to say yes to this, but the house is going to need cleaning. You're going to need to clean the house before the child comes round. So I always say to parents, instead of saying no, ask yourself, what would I need to say yes? So if your child comes home and says, you know, I want a new iPhone, you might say, I really want to say yes to that. But I would need to see you looking after the phone you've got first for 3 months, and I would need you to think about how you could earn half of the money. It's very different when we stop saying no and start saying yes, but tell our teenager what needs to happen for us to say yes. Very, very different way of being. And another way to deal with this is to say, I can see how it may look that way to you. And you don't say anything else. That's a great way to deal with this one. The jump down your throat invasion. I think most parents feel like they are walking on eggshells when they're around teenagers. You never quite know what mood they're in. And this one is just about pointing out their behaviour. So if they're jumping down your throat, they're swearing at you, or screaming at you, pointing out that behaviour. Do you realise that you're shouting at me? It's not acceptable for you to shout at me. Can you please stop? That's sometimes quite efficient. But what I've learned as well is quite often if you've got a teenager jumping down your throat, it could be that there's something else going on for them in their life. Excuse me. And what I've certainly learned from my daughter is that if she starts jumping down my throat, she's probably had an argument with her friends, or something's probably happened at school. So what I will do is when she has done that, I'll leave it, and then I'll go to see her in about half an hour and ask if she's okay. Because I know my daughter well enough to know that that's the case. But if there isn't anything wrong and they're just jumping down your throat, tell them what they're doing. Tell them it's not acceptable and ask them to stop. If they're not stopping, then you are going to then tell them what's going to happen if they continue. So if they're shouting at you, it would look like this. Joe, do you realise that you are shouting at me? It's not okay for you to shout at me. Please stop. If you continue to shout at me, I am going to walk away and not listen. Again, very factual, and you just keep saying it, and eventually they will get the idea. The silent treatment invasion. This one can be quite difficult because some teenagers will just lock themselves away, and that's just kind of the personality that they are. So, it's enough to, you've got to know your own teenager with this one. But what you shouldn't do is just because a teenager is locking themselves away or being silent is stop including them in family things. So if they've said yes 50 or 100, if they said no to doing something with you 50 or 100 times before, don't stop asking them. Still go and ask them. Do you want to come shopping with us? Do you want to come here? Make them feel that they're still part of the family, even though, they're preferring to be alone. And let them know you're there. So if they are upstairs playing games in their bedroom, sit with them, ask them about the game. Don't just isolate them because they're spending time alone. But what you do need to be aware of is depression is quite high in teenagers. So if it really does feel that it's like not normal behaviour, and obviously for each child that's different, then seek medical help because teenagers can get depressed really quite easily. So I have given you loads and loads of information there. Like I've said, you'll also be able to listen back to the recording of this. But quite often parents ask me where to start. And I think the most important thing in the teenagers is building that communication with them and staying in a great relationship with them. And research has shown that children who frequently eat with their families have better results at school, are less depressed, less likely to drink alcohol, smoke or use marijuana than children who eat with their families less than twice a week. So if you don't know where to start, then I suggest you start by having 2 to 3 meals together a week. Meals where you talk to each other, where, that are really nice affairs, not just, you all sit down, stuff you dinner and everybody leaves. Because they can really, really have such a big impact on everything, really. And I just want to leave you with this slide here, actually, this wonderful quote that I love. The most scary thing about young people today is how adults feel about them. And I love that quote because it really, really does state, I think, what is so important. That actually, all the research coming out of everywhere today is showing that our teenagers are actually more connected to their families, are behaving better. In fact, they are probably going to rebel by being better than worse. And the worst thing about them, or the most scary thing about them, is how adults feel about them. So, Dave, thank you for spending that 15 minutes with me. And again, I apologise if you were waiting on the webinar and I wasn't here. Well, I was here, you just couldn't hear me. So let's see what questions that you've got coming in for me here. So just bear with me one moment while I get the questions up. Okay, so I've got a question from Dan here, and he's saying, when can you start using all of this? Okay, that's such a great question. I can tell you from my experience, and I've used this with my she's now 10 actually, my youngest daughter. She's known nothing other than me being a coach. But I think it works really well if you start at about 5. That's what I've learned. Although you can, even when they're much earlier, and you're getting them dressed in the morning and having some sort of fight about what they're going to wear, I used to always put 2 outfits out and say, which do you choose? So you can start some of the concepts now. But also, when they get to 8, I think it gets really pivotal then, and that's when I'd start bringing in agreements and all the other tools that we talked about today. So, yeah, you can use them whenever. I think between 5 is when I started really using this stuff, but 8 is really pivotal. Gosh, I can't even say that word today. I hope that answers that, Dan. Okay, I've got Jenny. She's saying, what about screen time? Oh, Jenny, I could go on to screen time for absolutely forever. And hopefully I'll be doing a webinar on that soon, because I couldn't possibly start to go into all of that now, I can tell you. But really what I say is what you need to make sure that you have in your house is technology-free time and technology-free days. I don't think there is any optimal for any person, and there is no research done on this despite what it says. But what I make sure is that one day a week we have a technology-free day where nobody is allowed on technology, including me, which is quite difficult. And we also have technology-free, kind of hours in the day. So, for example, no technology at the dinner table. And you can see now why I've said that's really important about the meal times. I hope that answers that, Jenny. So what else have I got coming in here? Okay, Michelle saying, I try to stay consistent, but it's so hard. You know what? It is really, really hard, Michelle. And I'm a parent myself, and I'm not always consistent. And we're not all, running for 100% accuracy here. We're not trying to be perfect parents. What I do know, though, is that I am likely to be less consistent when I'm really tired or stressed or there's things going on in my life. And I think that we have to be really honest with our children. And if they're asking us something and we feel that if we deal with it in that moment, we're not going to be consistent, it's okay for us to say, you know what, I really can't deal with this at the moment. I'm too tired to deal with this. You need to ask me another time. And we have to be okay with saying that. Or, I'm really, really, I've got a lot going on at work today. I just can't answer this at the moment. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Or give yourself a few hours if you need, hours to relax. Can we talk about this in a few hours? Just because they're coming at you with everything urgent, and remember what we saw about the brain, everything is urgent to them. It doesn't mean it has to be urgent to you. Unless it is like something that they're wanting to do in 5 minutes' time, then obviously you're going to have to deal with that. But don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes, we're all allowed to be inconsistent, but give yourself time when you need it, and that's the most important thing, I think. Hope that one answers that. Okay, so I've got Lisa saying, what if they won't communicate? Well, great question. And, as we've seen in the brain development, sometimes they don't communicate very well because of what's happening in the temporal lobe. Don't give up. That's my first answer to that. Quite often what I find happens is a parent telling me that their child won't communicate with them, when actually what's really happening is that the parent is, every time they're communicating with that child, they're telling the child what they're doing wrong or what they need them to do, or they're having a go at them, or they're, have you done this, have you done that, or they're nagging them. So what I think is really important is that you have conversations that are really don't have an outcome. They're nothing to do with anything, really. And this is why I created Think Cards, because those questions are just, allow families to have conversations about things that they would not normally be talking about. So, if you for example, in the news at the moment, we've got the whole phone hacking thing going on, and I'm sure that's reached America and a few other places. Well, I know it's reached America. And you could just, be in the car with them and say, what do you think of this phone hacking scandal then? Just have a conversation with them about something that's newsworthy, or something that's just not about what they've done wrong or about nagging them, and because generally that will definitely shut them up. So I hope that one helps there. Okay, I've got one coming in from Trevor, who's saying, well, what about punishment? How do we get them to do what you want? Well, again, I could talk about that forever. I'm very against punishment, A, because it really doesn't work. It might work in the short term, but I can absolutely guarantee it won't work in the long term. And there's this great quote by someone who came up with a system I'm trained in, actually, called William Glasser. And he says you can only hold a gun to someone's head for so long until they either don't care it's there or they don't care if you'll shoot. And this is what happens when we get into that whole punishment role. We punish once, and then each time we've got to do a bit more than we did before because it's not having any effect. And I think that actually life is all about consequences. It's not about punishment. Yes, if we commit a crime, we will be punished for that, and that's right. But, I'm assuming your child hasn't committed a crime. It's about us coming together with them to create a natural consequence. Because actually it's all about, teaching them to be responsible adults. So that will probably be another webinar that I will do at some point, because I could talk about that one forever, to be honest. So I hope that answered that one. Probably not in the way you want, but just think about punishment in a different way. We can't control what anybody does. We'd like to think we can, but we can't. And actually, by trying to control, we really lose control. And if you start to think about how I can build a relationship with this child so that they care enough about me to do what I'm asking, versus how can I punish this child so they'll do what I want, you can see which one is more empowering there, can't you? Okay. Well, I can see we're getting close to the hour here, and I don't want to hold you up much longer. So if you've got any more questions for me, then please do email me, sarah@sarah-newton.com. If you want to explain anything more to you, then you can email me too. I'm just looking at this link on this slide here. I think that's an old link, so I need to remove that, so my apologies for that. I don't think that will work, and if it will, you might get through to something that makes no sense to you. So I apologise for that, and that will be changed. So thank you so much for sharing this evening with me. I hope you've learnt all that you came here for, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.